بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله وكفاه والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فسلام الله عليكم. People, welcome to the world of Qadi Iyad. Right, we're going to be taking a look at this book, Al-I'lam bi-Hudud Qawa'id al-Islam. Okay, so I'lam is really like an announcement, making an announcement, if you like, or announcing or declaring a declaration of the hudud, the parameters of Qawa'id al-Islam, of the foundations of Islam. Popularly known as either for Qadi Iyad Al-I'lam lil-Qadi, or sometimes Qawa'id al-Islam, the foundations of Islam by Qadi Iyad. That's quite popularly sometimes just restricted to those words. We'll go into what makes this text slightly unique and some type of individual qualities of this text shortly. And what we'll try and do, bi-idhnillah, is also cover an aspect, if not completely, the first pillar, the first qa'idah, not al-qa'idah in that sense, but the first al-qa'idah, the first foundation, covering that from this. But before we do that, an intro to the man, the myth, the legend himself, Al-Qadi Iyad. So before we go in, what do we already know about Qadi Iyad? Let's have a bit of because it's good to know what we already know. Okay, tell me something we know about him. What do we know about him?
From Spain.
Okay, so from Spain. Cool. Barcelona or okay, and any specific? Not really. Just from Spain, Al-Andalus. Al-Andalus. Yeah. Okay, that's, you mean Muslim Spain. Okay, so
you mean Paris.
Any type of particular century? What are we looking at?
Even the 500s, I think. We're looking at the Moravian age.
Okay, so which is, what would you say? So okay, towards the end of 400, 500. Okay, good. That's good. He was, whether he was originally from Spain, but Spain was definitely where he was for a good while in his life. And yeah, we'll go through. He did move about a bit between Maghrib and between Al-Andalus, and he was around in these centuries, the end of the 400s into the 500s. We'll go into. He was born in Seville. Did you say? No, he wasn't actually born in Seville. What else? Any other interesting things about him? He was actually born in Sabta. But no. That's a very good point, actually, that that Rashad has just made. That Qadi Iyad is one of those unique people that is known universally. He's not. You see, some people are legends within a madhab. So as an example, I'll give you an example. Let's just say, I could say, Abu Bakr ibn Yunus, a legend. Qadi Abdul Wahhab al-Baghdadi, a legend. Ibn Qassa, Qadi Ismail, all these people are okay, maybe Qadi Ismail a bit, not too much of a good example there, but let's just say you've got so many of these people who are legends, Lakhmi and all these people, but they're not necessarily known universally. They're not known throughout all the madhabs. They are known within the Maliki madhab. If you don't know of them, then you obviously haven't got to those layers of the madhab yet. But anybody that has studied the madhab will know of these people. What about outside? So let's say somebody within the world of the realm of the Hanafiya, within the realm of the Shafi'iyya. And I don't mean by this, do some ulama from them, have they quoted them here and there, or were they aware of them? They may have been, but are they generally known? So a lot of the times, a lot of ulama are not known as well known in other madhabs. Qadi Iyad is one of those people that is. Undeniably not. I mean, he's just like he's a legend when it comes. It doesn't matter what madhab you're from. You've heard of Qadi Iyad. So that's a good point. What else? Anything else interesting about him?
He's a teacher who worked at Kushi and Ghazali, where they got respect for. And then his dad was one of Ibn Hazm's sons. That's why he was a bit hardcore.
No, that's Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi.
How was it? Ibn Arabi.
Ibn al-Arabi. Qadi Iyad.
Because Qadi Iyad taught.
wasn't so Ghazali.
He wasn't. Was
He taught about Qadi Abu
no.
Bakr.
Okay, was he now that's interesting because Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi is categorized as one of his teachers. Although he's not a core teacher of his, but he's somebody who he has taken hadith from.
Ghazali teacher of Qadi Abu Bakr.
Of Abu Bakr, yes, but not of we're talking about Qadi Iyad. Qadi Iyad.
Fatwa against the Ihya.
Yes, okay, that's interesting, and we'll come to that here. The fatwa against the Ihya Ulumuddin. Anything else we know, Junaid's?
He authored a shifa.
Alright. How, you see, Qadi Iyad, you can't almost not know of him except know that he is the author of the Shifa. Well said. Now, so there's some interesting things. We know something about where he was born, where he kind of lived, some of the works he did, some of the fatawa. We know that he was a legend within and without of the madhab. We know that he's authored some works like the Shifa. Anything else? What else has he authored?
He authored a famous work on all of the famous Maliki scholars, 30
Okay, the Tartib, excellent. Good, good. Okay, what?
That you count on the Mudawwar.
Yep, the Tanbihat upon the Mudawwana. Good, excellent. Where is he? Where was he buried?
I think it was in North Africa, right? So he was in Fez or something.
Alright, see, Marrakesh. It is indeed Marrakesh, that's correct. Right, okay, guys, let's take a look.
Does that actually, can you visit that site?
Yes, have you visited this site? Yep, you can indeed. He's actually, and we'll go through that in a moment when we just come to here. Qadi Iyad Abu al-Fadl, this is his full name. Iyad ibn Musa ibn Iyad ibn Amr ibn Musa ibn Iyad al-Yahsubi. There were a few Iyads and there were a few Musas. So you can see there was a trend actually of people naming the grandson after the grandfather. And you see that with Ibn Rushd as well. So it goes on like they just... And so you see that with a few people. But so he was born in 476 Hijri. Okay. Which is really just probably just over a decade, probably about what? No, wait there for so it's probably about 13 years after roughly about Ibn Abdul Barr had passed away. So, and he was born in Sabta, which is Ceuta. How do they Ceuta, okay, they pronounce Ceuta, okay, so, which is in Morocco, north, I mean, right towards the north, and it's actually still it's still a Spanish colony, isn't it?
That's
what the Spanish list.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, is it still a Spanish colony? Okay, so I mean, I know that there's that, and there's Malia or what Malia, so that still remains under Spanish control. I was under the impression this is as well Sabta. Now he is unanimously accepted, acknowledged and honored as an absolute master in the sciences of the deen, including tafsir, including hadith. He was a hafidh of hadith. Including things like language, nahu, and not just nahu, grammar, but also lugha, in terms of knowing the meanings of words, knowing what is more eloquent, what is correct. He was actually he wasn't just like, oh, he's good at this, he was like a legend at this type of stuff. Some of his teachers in hadith include people, I mean, generally they will say people like Abu Ali al-Ghassani as well, but there is some dispute about whether he actually met him. He was a major, I mean, they definitely say their time overlapped, but he does transmit from him. Whether he transmits direct or indirect, There's been some debate on it, but definitely one of his greatest teachers in hadith was Abu Ali as-Sudfi, who is a major source of the hadith being transmitted, or really disseminated is the word, into Al-Andalus. So many people go back through this guy, through Abu Ali as-Sudfi, a major hafidh of hadith. And Qadi Iyad is one of, he will quote him extensively throughout his works. And obviously in fiqh he had many teachers, amongst them people like Abu Muhammad ibn Attab, a very famous Maliki scholar, faqih, and a don from Qurtuba. And within Al-Andalus, they did move about and stuff, but generally a very famous scholar within the madhab. So we know he kind of learnt this. He was very grounded in his learning. What he does is he lives in Sabta. In the year 507 Hijri, he travels to Al-Andalus and starts to meet some of the ulama there, take from them, do this. This is where he meets a lot of these Qurtubiyin. He meets them. He comes back to Sabta. You'll see in Qadi Iyad's life, there's a lot of this going back, coming back, going back. And actually, he speaks about it before him, because if you looked in his forefathers, the person where he says his, like Iyad ibn Musa ibn Iyad ibn Amr, this Amr, his name was actually Amrun, and which was like an Andalusi type of variation, a trend, who they say was these people who writes that they were originally from Al-Andalus, these people, and then they moved over to North Africa, and they say that they moved to Qayrawan. But what had happened was the Ubaydiyin at that time, who were this type of sect, and Ibn Abi Zayd, he kind of like was around at that time and faced a lot of those difficulties with them. But they imprisoned Amrun's brothers. So they imprison them and take them into Al-Andalus, take them back. The Ubaydiyin take them to some place. So his Qadi Iyad's great-grandfather, this Amrun, what he does is, in order to be slightly closer, because they were in Qayrawan, to his brothers, he moves to Sabta, which is right, it's like a port across to Al-Andalus. So in order to have that proximity, so this movement, kind of moving back, forth, traveling, continues right through to Qadi Iyad's time, and he speaks about this as he speaks about his forefathers as well. But when he comes back to Sabta, he's become this don within the madhab, to that extent that they say like he knew the masail of the Mudawwana almost inside out, to the extent that most people were too awestruck to actually even engage in a debate with him regarding the Mudawwana. That they say that people used to be like, kanu yahabunahu, that they would be like, whoa, to like, no way, I ain't gonna even like engage in any discussion, like a debate regarding the Mudawwana with this person. And then soon after that, what he does is, because of his knowledge and his prestige, he becomes a member of this Majlis al-Shura for Sabta, for Sweta. So he becomes, so they have this Majlis al-Shura. Sounds a bit Indo-Pak, right? We've got Majlis al-Shura, right? So he becomes one of their members. His influence is that good that they then make him the judge of Sabta. So he becomes this, now the Qadi of Sabta. This is his position amongst people. You see, after several years, they say about 530, going into 531 Hijri, he is then moved. This is the time, by the way, the era of the Murabitin. This is when the Murabitin are ruling, but it's not Yusuf ibn Tashfin. Yusuf ibn Tashfin passes away in 500 Hijri. This is his son Ali ibn Yusuf ibn Tashfin, who does have a good relationship with Qadi Iyad, to the extent that he actually feels that when Qadi Iyad becomes in charge of Sabta, that he fixes it up so well, that he becomes so impressed with this, that he says to him that, in Granada, we've got some issues. People are messed up. So he says, I want you to go there and do your work over there. Like I want to make you the Qadi of Granada, because so you can fix things up and stuff like this. And he does, and he goes there. Obviously, this is 531 Hijri now when he's sent to Granada. This is also not too far from when the whole Murabitin thing is coming towards an end. And the Mohads or the Muwahhideen have already begun their movement, and they're doing their thing, and they're saying all this type of stuff against the Murabitin, and all of that is going on. So now, when he goes over to Granada and he starts working there, and he stays now in Al-Andalus for a while, and he actually falls into a bit of trouble with the actual ruler of Al-Andalus, who's meant to be the ruler from the Murabitin, who at the time, I believe his name was Tamim, and what he is doing is he's meant to be like a wali of Al-Andalus for his father, who is in Morocco at the time, Al-Maghrib. Now, Qadi Iyad actually picks up several things which are against him in Granada, and many people who are associated with the ruler end up becoming not persecuted, but end up becoming they get punished, or they get certain sentences and stuff like this. And the ruler intervenes and says to Qadi Iyad, I want you to kind of like, basically I want you to toe the line. And he refuses. And this becomes a bit of an issue to the extent that that ruler, the wali, has him removed from Qada. So he's removed. It didn't upset him too much, because he just went back to his world of really the ilmi circles, and whether it's writing or giving fatwa and dealing with stuff like that. And he just goes back to that. And then he continues to kind of travel back to Qurtuba and stuff like that. You see, in the year 543, he goes back to the Maghrib. Now at this time, the Muwahhideen are in. And within a year, Qadi Iyad actually passes away. And he dies in 544 Hijri in Marrakesh. Now that's generally his type of outline. He, during his lifetime, is a prolific writer, right? He is somebody that they say that has written, is one of the most well-known authors from Al-Andalus, from the Maghrib. Really, if you want to call the whole thing Al-Andalus and Maghrib, he has, when you look at hadith, he has a book, a commentary upon Sahih Muslim known as Ikmal al-Mu'lim, where he completes the commentary of Al-Mazari, an absolute legendary book. He has his Ash-Shifa. Shifa is a book regarding the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. It is a legendary book. It is like, if you're going to talk about the books of seerah, it is a must within them. Okay, so, and to the extent, I mean, people have praised it so much, and till this day, I mean, till date, it's so highly praised and renowned for his works and eloquence in it, that people have said, there's a poem that كلهم حاولوا الدواء لكن ما أتى بالشفاء إلا إياد, that they say that all of them tried to bring the cure, the medicine. They say that all of them tried the medicine, like tried to bring some type of medicine, but the one who could bring the shifa, the cure, was Qadi Iyad. And it's a very, obviously a play on words, but to this extent, I mean, that's how he's known. In Lugha, in linguistics, he has a book known as Masharik al-Anwar, which is almost like a dictionary, a glossary, if you like, of the words which appear in the Sahihain and the Muwatta, which is in print. He has his notes upon the Mudawwana, known as Tanbihat al-Mustanbata, fi halli mushkilat al-Mudawwana wal-Mukhtalata. And then that's now recently come into print, although it's not entirely complete, but it's still in 5 volumes, so there's a good amount of it. He has, other than that, he's got works in actual usul hadith, is ilma. I did bring just 1-2 books around to show as well of his. I mean, there's many. His ilma, which is interesting, and I was thinking might be worth at some point kind of going through, is his book on usul hadith. Once again, very I mean, he has his take on things, and he also has certain, not just very technical type of work, sometimes some type of literary contributions too. So you see, he has a hadith which is he has a work known as Bughyatul Ra'id. So I brought this to show you, which is very interesting because it's the sharah فيما في حديث أم زرع من الفوائد, which is a very fascinating hadith. It's a hadith in which and it appears in most books, most of the Ummahat, where the Prophet ﷺ tells Aisha a story about these 11 women, and they're all speaking about their husbands, and some are some are praising, some are complaining, but the hadith contains some amazing eloquence, like some very difficult words in it, like the language that's used in the hadith, because it's extremely concise. It's sometimes, oh, does it mean this? Does it mean that? Until to the extent that, and then the main character almost amongst these women is this one lady known as Zara. And then in the end, the hadith is like Abu Zara. You see, he's deeply in love with Zara and so on. And the hadith mentions it, except he divorces her. And then he goes off with another woman or something. But the hadith was, in the end, the Prophet ﷺ said to Aisha that I am to you like Abu Zara is to Zara, except I won't divorce you. And so it's an interesting, very fascinating hadith. It's not short, it's a long hadith. And Qadi Iyad actually has a commentary on it, which is really interesting. I mean, so you can see he wasn't just restricted to things which were just seen as like, oh, I'm just going to be just pure fatawa only, or pure just being very, very just academic. I mean, he did go into things which almost had an entertaining side to them as well, but at the same time very fun, enjoyable, but ilmi. He's got his book known as the Ghunya, which he wrote about his teachers, who his teachers were. In there, he does mention Qadi Abu Bakr ibn Arabi. He mentions that he came and he took a hadith from him and so on. He mentions Ibn Rushd in there and so on, and many other ulama. He has a book known as Sayf al-Maslul, ala man sabba Rasul. Ashab al-Rasul, sorry. Ala man sabba Ashab al-Rasul, but it's not in print, unfortunately. His Shifa does have some discussions on things like that, about anybody who insults the Prophet ﷺ or the companions by extension. He also has Tartib al-Madarik, a book which is incredible. It's a biography of many, I won't say most or all, but of many of the Maliki ulama, right up until his day and age. And he includes some amazing issues and facts in there that it really makes you think, why does he include some of these things unless he's maybe, I don't know, like why would he do that sometimes? So unless he's kind of maybe inclined to some opinions, or maybe not, I don't know, maybe he's just being expressive, but he quotes this is being recorded. So he does a lot of these type of things sometimes, but he quotes in there quite a bit. And what is interesting though, I've found this interesting, is that he misses out certain people which I'd always found really amusing, like Abu Bakr ibn Arabi. He leaves him out, and I don't, including Ibn Rushd al-Jadd, he leaves out Ibn Rushd al-Jadd, and I've always found that intriguing. I've never found a satisfying answer to that. I mean, it could just be simple, just coincidence, or I mean, just a matter of just keeping things brief and brevity and whatever. But I mean, whatever the reason, but that is an interesting question mark. So that's some of the works he's done. Amongst them is this I'lam. And the thing about the I'lam really is that Qadi Iyad, what makes it kind of unique is that he's built this upon a simple hadith, which could be really one of two a hadith. Either the hadith which is transmitted by Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh, which is the hadith of Jibreel, that where a person enters and then goes to the Prophet ﷺ and sits in such a manner, and then he says akhbirni anil Islam, and the Prophet ﷺ mentions, and then anil iman wal ihsan. Or the hadith of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, that where he mentions that bunya al islamu ala khams, that Islam is built upon these foundations, upon these 5 foundations. And that is really what this book is built upon. And the unique thing about it is that it's a small text in which he covers things quite simply, really, not simplistically, but simply, yet maintaining his eloquence. You see, Qadi Iyad was actually renowned for his eloquence. He's very extremely eloquent at times, and sometimes too eloquent. You can't understand what he's saying. I mean, if you read some of his, and you know what I recently came across, which was really interesting, was a letter. I mean, it was published as part of some of the works. Was a letter of Qadi Iyad to the Prophet ﷺ, which he authors, and it's not in his Shifa, but it says somebody's kind of recently. I mean, when I say recently, I mean relatively recently. They've worked on it and brought it into print, and it was with some other type of publications which I had. So in there, this letter, which is probably really just maybe it's just an A4 at most, or probably 1.5, you know. So, but it's not too long, and he's just speaking out to the Prophet ﷺ. So it's as though he's addressing the Prophet ﷺ, because Qadi Iyad, like many other Andalusian, didn't actually get to go on the Hajj. At that time, many Andalusian did not used to go on the Hajj because it was way too dangerous. And the fatwa was that it wasn't actually permissible to try because you're just going to get killed. I mean, many ulama had given that fatwa. To the extent that some of them almost considered omitting Kitab al-Hajj from their furu', which was like, what the hell? Oh, today we would have really lacked out had they followed that opinion, which they didn't, luckily. But but he writes this letter, and I must say, subhanallah, you know, I seriously, since it's a brief letter, I would translate it if I believe I could. It's just that you know, one is just simply translating. If I attempted something like that, I would just kill it, because it is way too eloquent. And just translating it, I don't know, just like this in terms of it's just, well, it kind of means this kind of, it just kills the whole eloquence of it. But it is amazing. And I'll try and get hold of that and maybe get you guys like a copy of it or something. So that's a bit about him. As to this book, it does have some commentaries on it historically. There were people like Abu Abbas al-Qubab. He had done a commentary on it. Abu Qasim al-Uqbani had done who were actually contemporaries, both of them, Qubab and Uqbani, and they're also contemporaries or around the time. I mean, there is an overlap between them and Sheikh Ahmed Zarruq as well. And so that's, I mean, they've done a commentary on it. I believe 1-2 other people had as well, but none of those, Allahu A'lam, as far as I'm aware, are available or in print or found. I'm not aware of that. Qadi Iyad, as I mentioned, passed away in 544 Hijri, which is a year after Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi, who was born, by the way, a year before him. So when Qadi Iyad was born in 476, he was born in 475, and he dies in 544. Qadi Iyad does, and he dies in 543, like 1 year before. So that's just an interesting overlap, an interesting play of fate. His grave was actually not discovered till 712 Hijri, but during the time of the Mariniyin. Abu Yusuf Yaqub al-Mansur al-Marini, in his time it was discovered, and he said, and the ulama said to kind of, they encouraged to kind of set it up and build around it, and for ulama to visit it and to kind of maybe even host classes there or read Quran, just so you can, by the presence of these ulama, people will start coming there and they will know that this is Qadi Iyad and so on. There are some conspiracies surrounding his death. See, this is the question. Did he die? Did he fall, or was he pushed? That's the thing, you see. So, I mean, it's that, well, we know in 543 Hijri, he had moved back to the Maghrib. Now, he did go to Marrakesh. He did out of Sabta, and that's in that year. They believe, you see, what is known is during the rise of the Muwahhideen, he was actually very much against them. And they say that at a particular time, this is I'll kind of tell you what's known. That, you see, the Muwahhideen in a particular city, Salah, I believe, which is in modern day Morocco, I think, that they had kind of attacked that city or town and really massacred the people. And Qadi Iyad was afraid that this would happen in Sabta. So he had gone to Sabta and fortified the city and kind of rallied a cry for war and got people together. And then also there's an understanding that he was in communication with I believe his name was Abu Ishaq, was it Ibn Ghaniya, who Ibn Ghaniya was one of the remaining Murabitin that was in charge of or in control of Majorca and the surrounding, the Balearic Islands. He was still in control of them, and he was still trying to re-establish the Murabitin thing. And he was one of the only Murabitin that actually lasted for a few decades, even after like the collapse of the Murabitin thing. So they say that Qadi Iyad was in communication with him and had asked him to come and bring his army to Sabta, and that the people of Sabta will help and join forces and fight against the Muwahhideen. There are reports that had happened, although when the Muwahhideen found out and they took a staggering army to Sabta, that there was no response from Ibn Ghaniya. Like Ibn Ghaniya didn't turn up, although they say that he had originally planned to do so and support and come and conquer, but he didn't. Some people say that was a huge thing. What we do know is that there was this resistance from Qadi Iyad towards the Muwahhideen because of the type of extreme behavior, because they were very harsh and extreme. Obviously the Mahdi was somebody that is known as Mahdi ibn Tumurt. He was somebody that had some wacko beliefs, as it was, and he did believe that he was kind of ma'soom, he was protected, the isma, that he was, whether he was the Mahdi or a Mahdi, I don't know, but he did relate to himself as the Mahdi, and his followers did, and he was very cultish in his thing. Having said that, he was extremely ascetic. He was somebody that wasn't interested in the dunya at all, and he was, and nobody can knock that, a scholar. And they say he was very learned, although he had very weird beliefs. And so among some of the people he studied with was al-Ghazali. And there's that story that, which some people have questioned whether it was true, but that Ghazali said, kind of accepted that because he asks in a story, he asks Ghazali, make dua that Allah allows me to take over that kingdom of the Murabitin. And then they say he kind of made dua for him. I don't know whether that's true or whatever, but the point is that because they say that he asks him that what did they do with my book? and he said mazzaquhu, they ripped it to pieces. And he says, apparently in this story, he says, mazzaqallah mulkahum, may Allah destroy their kingdom as they destroyed my book. And then he says, I'll make dua, it's at my hands. And he says, yeah, go. And that's, whether that's a story which he himself wanted to popularize, or whether that actually took place. Obviously the burning of the Ihya did take place in Al-Andalus and stuff like this. And Qadi Iyad was also one of the people that actually gave the ruling it's permissible to burn the Ihya Ulumuddin. But I mean, that's a different side of Qadi Iyad almost, which some of these scholars had strange sides to them. Maybe it was just a bad day he was having. They're like, he's like, yeah, burn it. Like, do you want to finish the sentence? Just burn it. Okay. So there's this thing about, anyway, there is this resistance from Qadi Iyad towards the Muwahhideen, and he fought actively against them. Then he eventually gives in, as does, you see, this is interesting, because who else dies whilst visiting the Muwahhideen rulers? Anybody? Who else dies almost that same type of year? Really, that is sent is Qadi Abu Bakr ibn Arabi, because he's also sent to make truce. They send him as one of the leaders, like he's old, as is Qadi Iyad at that time, but they send him, as in the people of Andalus send him and he goes and he kind of accepts the conditions and does this, and then also dies within that year. But there's no conspiracy against him. The only unique thing of him going was that he was also the person that went to meet Yusuf ibn Tashfin the first time, and was an ambassador for him to the Abbasids along with his father. So at the end of his life, he comes to the Muwahhideen as an ambassador once again. So it's interesting how he turns up to both. The ruler at the time is Abdul Mu'min ibn Ali. Qadi Iyad also gives in, because it comes to a point that, look, the Muwahhideen have taken over, and the Mahdi was weird, was definitely a wacko in his beliefs, and there's a lot of stories about him. I mean, many things are true, in the sense that he was extremely harsh against people. People in his following, if they did things like didn't get up for tahajjud, he would have them beaten. Like, he didn't tolerate any of this. We wouldn't have lasted a day. Right. So he didn't tolerate any of this, and he had this thing that everybody in his army, in his group, in his following, had to recite like a good portion of the Quran daily, and everybody had to do this. He was super strict when it came to religiosity, and he was very ascetic, wasn't into the dunya. However, he had this thing about the isma, about him being ma'soom and being the Mahdi, and he had certain other weird beliefs as well, which he kind of brought in. And they say he had an amalgamation of loads of things, whether they were Shi'i beliefs or some from the Sunni and some from, because he also pushes, his creed generally seems to reflect the Ash'ari creed. But one of the ways he gets in is he actually claims that the Murabitin at the time were actually Mujassima. He claims that they are anthropomorphists, and pushes this amongst people and says it's necessary that we fight them and kill them. And he believes that, he says it's permissible to take their money, to take their children, take their women, take whatever you want. He says it's because these people are kuffar. And he used to openly say this type of stuff. And you know what's interesting, I mean, not to digress too much, is there is a point, you see, in Ali ibn Yusuf's time when he realizes this person emerging, and he has him summoned to the place and actually has him debate a scholar. And it's interesting because he debates, but he is remember, the Mahdi or Muhammad ibn Tumurt was a scholar. I mean, none of the ulama that have written his biography have ever kind of disputed that. Now the thing is that when they do call him and they debate and they have this thing, and he says, oh, you know, and he speaks out against all these munkarat, and one of the things he mentions is that the princess at the time used to walk about without her hair covered in the streets and stuff like this, and he says that and you're not doing a nahi anil munkar, and he says to, and he does this to the extent, but he gives such a wa'ad, a pious wa'ad to Ali ibn Yusuf at the time, that they say he actually almost starts crying with his words. And then he says to him, look, he says, this is just a good guy. And then he says, okay, he's a bit weird on he's trying to obviously do a rebellion. But he takes advice that, all right, what should I do? So one guy says to him that one of his mushawid, one of his type of advice says that, you know what, if you're not going to execute him, at least imprison him. Uproot this, this problem right now. Basically, whilst it's there, you can just pull it out from the roots. And the other person says, look, listen, he's okay, he's weird, he's doing this, but he's nothing to you. Come on, you've got this kingdom. The Murabitin Yusuf ibn Tashfin made Marrakesh. And Marrakesh was built from scratch. I mean, you've got this massive, a huge part of Africa, Al-Andalus. This guy is nothing. He's got this wacky thing, he's ascetic, he's calling people to his extreme, nahi anil munkar, do this, do this. Okay, a few people, he's got a handful of followers. Because in the beginning, what did he have? 12 followers, and then he had 50. That's all he had in the beginning. And then Yusuf, Ali ibn Yusuf, is convinced with that. And it reminds me of a dialogue from a movie, a Bollywood one, where he says, "Yaar, bahut hi mamuli aadmi hai." He goes, "Yeah, we're overestimating him. This guy's just too ordinary." And then, boy, as in that movie, that person becomes the cause for his downfall. You see, when the Muwahhideen do rise, they rise to become the most largest empire that had ever been established in that part of the world. We're talking almost up to Central Africa. They had, like they say, spanning at least a third of Africa and Al-Andalus. They became one of the largest type. You don't understand, in some of the battles when they go, like, you know, before you hear, like when beginning with Tariq bin Ziyad, or even later on, he went across with 7,000, he went across with 10,000. This guy, whoa, he went across with like 12,000. This guy went, whoa, with 20. This guy, this person was so big, went across with 50,000. You hear these type of stories. You don't understand, in some of the narrations when the Muwahhideen, some of them landed in Al-Andalus to deal with some of the things, they took across anything from between 250 to 500,000 people, and their armies were just like, they were just rallies. Like they used to say, right, we're doing this, join. Obviously they had a standing army as well, but this is, you don't, like, their empire was massive. It was not like, but it began with him and his wacko beliefs. The people after him, Abdul Mu'min, like in the time of Qadi Iyad, the one who's in charge, didn't necessarily believe in that Mahdi concept, but he hid it. Like he didn't openly reject this concept of the Mahdiya, and he refused to do it because it was too early, and he felt that, you know, like if he did that, the whole thing could crumble. So anyway, Qadi Iyad is taking this. Some people say that a dispute broke out between Qadi Iyad and Abdul Mu'min ibn Ali, regarding which some people have said that he said to Qadi Iyad, I want you to write a book affirming the Mahdi and saying this, which is a bit weird to believe, because from what I've kind of researched, that Abdul Mu'min wasn't convinced himself about the Mahdi concept. But a dispute having broken out is very natural. That does make sense. They say that although Abdul Mu'min let him go and said it's cool, don't worry about it, did one of those, yeah, it's good. Right, that as soon as he's kind of gone or whatever, but shortly after, basically, they say Al-Dhahabi kind of writes that he was stabbed with spears and like cut up, like totally cut up into pieces and stuff like this. Some people have said he was poisoned, and some Jew had poisoned him and stuff like this.
They always say
What was he doing eating the Jewish person's food? The question would be. But that is one conspiracy, a Jewish person poisoned him. But the other one, that he was cut up. I'll tell you what is interesting about that, is that they say his body was dumped in this and buried in this area outside of Marrakesh, or which is now within Marrakesh, known as Aghmat. And it was actually something that the Murabitin, that area, they actually gave to the Christians. Which is, this part is factual. That we can't say 100% how he was killed, but what we can say is that he was definitely buried quietly. Like, people don't know much about where he got buried. Like, he was buried in this place, and that area was then given to the Christians to form a neighborhood, and not just a neighborhood, but their graveyards and stuff like this. Where he was buried, the people that had buried him and didn't know that he was obviously a legend and stuff like this had written, oh, this is the grave of Qadi Iyad and so on. But because people generally didn't know, you're not going to just go around the whole country looking at random graves, and especially now that it became a Christian area. Now what happens is, over a century later and more, in 712 Hijri, when some of the Christians had betrayed the Mariniyin, there was certain fatwa given that this betrayal has broken their treaty and their security, and therefore after the warnings they were kind of warned, and then they were attacked by people, and some of the ulama gave a fatwa and they attacked these places. And part of what they understood was that these Christians that had betrayed them had received a huge amount of gold and wealth in return for the betrayal. And there was this rumor that they've hidden the gold since they know we're attacking. And this rumor came that they've actually hidden them in graves. So a lot of the people started gold digging, and they started going into these graves and started like hunting. And whilst they were looking in the graves, they found the grave of Qadi Iyad. So from there, and then Abu Yusuf Yaqub al-Mansur al-Marini was so chuffed with this that he was so glad to hear that they discovered where Qadi Iyad. That's when he announced for the ulama to come, and he announced for it to be around it to be set up and for it to be known that this is Qadi Iyad and the whole thing.
How did they know if he was dumped? You wouldn't expect there to be like a...
You see, that's why I said that is what is known, that he wasn't, his burial was kind of silent because he was a known figure. So if they had announced it, people would have reported and there would have been a huge janazah, and that didn't take place. So we know that it was quite silent, as in a few people must have known. The fact that, how did they know he was actually buried? When they discovered his grave, it was actually written in the stone that this is the grave of Qadi Iyad and blah. You know, like the people that buried him, obviously some of them must have obviously rated him and written. But it was just that the Muwahhideen then gave that area to the Christians, that people don't generally go there. It became a Christian graveyard. So, as to why they would have killed him, I mean, that remains to... Perhaps it was most likely just his... If he was killed, because there is the other thing that he just died a natural death. However, he just got buried on the side like that. His son, when he speaks about him, says that, oh no, there was none of this animosity. He says he was amongst the first to accept the Muwahhideen and rate them and this and this and this. But people say the reason he wrote that in the book was because he was living in the time of the Muwahhideen, and basically he had to, if he didn't say it, well, there could have been more problems. So the thing is that it's interesting to kind of know anyway that this was the man, the myth, the legend, okay, Qadi Iyad, who really is one of those few people who is throughout Islamic history unanimously just known by his first name. Right? Unlike actually many scholars who are usually not known by their first name. And he's one of those that is just known, and usually one of those that whenever you say his name, you only almost always say it with the word Qadi. He's one of the few people actually that perhaps had this. I'm not saying that's I'm just saying that's unique about him, that's all. And you know, so, and he was somebody who wrote a lot of poetry. It's interesting to read some of his poetry, because even in his poetry you see this side to him where he's got this, you know, this whole, it's not this stern type, very chilled out type of side in some of his poetry. I'll get some of his poetry for you sometime, inshallah. But right, so that said, that kind of really sums up this legend. Now going to his book Al-I'lam.
Can I just ask a couple of questions?
No.
The first, they're related to this, the Ihya and Sufism.
Okay.
If you burnt the Ihya, is it a fair assumption to say that you didn't, wasn't inclined towards Sufi tariqas and that kind of stuff?
Oh, why are you trying to turn this, hijack this class and turn it into... You see, I don't... You see, the thing is this, look... You see, there's a few things here. First of all, in his time, these Sufi turuq hadn't been established. They weren't like Sufi turuq like the way they are today. They weren't like obviously people like Abu Hasan al-Shadhili and all these people come after. They're not around yet. Like Qadi Iyad precedes that type of time. Even Imam Ghazali didn't have his own type of tariqah and stuff like this. And so, as to Imam Ghazali's type of tasawwuf, he didn't say, like, Qadi Iyad wasn't the person at the forefront leading the campaign to burn the Ihya. But in Qurtuba and in Al-Andalus, it did become a phenomenon that the Ihya was burnt. And Qadi Iyad was one of those people that when asked, he also condoned it. He said to burn it. The justification they said at the time was that this person has used, and you see, he was obviously a major. Now there's a few things here. One angle which is generally presented is that obviously him as well was a major hafiz of hadith, and they say that the ahadith in there are unacceptable to generally, because there's a huge amount of them that you're guiding people with that are not actually established and not sound, and amongst them there's claims that perhaps many, or I don't know how many, are fabricated, but there's definitely huge issues regarding a huge amount of the validity of many. I mean, so I'm not just saying one, two, like many. And so because the whole book is guiding people towards this ascetic, like being more like into zuhud and stuff, and a lot of it's based, that's the pretext Okay, that is the pretext. No, for generally in the time, like, because in the time in Qurtuba, when they said this book, we don't want this to spread, it's based like this, it's got these ahadith, and they presented it to the rulers, and they said we want it burnt, and the ulama gave the fatwa that burn it. So this was many judges of Al-Andalus that said that. Amongst them, Qadi Iyad was amongst those that was asked as well and said yes, burn it. Now, that's the general official pretext to it, was that the hadith in it were either fabricated or too weak to be just spread amongst masses. Now, there are other opinions in the sense that, like, once again, this isn't conclusive, but there's other takes that was this also something to do with the fact that the Muwahhideen were pushing Ghazali so much, and people didn't, and Ghazali becomes, you know, like sometimes what happens is, I've got like we've got a name, right, we've got a name which we won't refer to, but the thing is that sometimes you see, there's a person which you don't necessarily have issues with, but some people may push that person so much in your face that you now start to have issues with this person, or you start to criticize this person, even though if it was just left alone, you probably wouldn't have a problem with that person. So as an example, sometimes you get, like, some scholars are highlighted and some people push them, they just pick them up so much and only quote them all the time, to the extent that other people now start finding faults with those scholars. Whereas had of the first people not done that, most people wouldn't have had a problem with those ulama. So, or with these people, and that may have happened also here, in the sense that the Muwahhideen, because Mahdi ibn Tumurt there was this story that Ghazali had made dua for his thing, and this was being circulated. Whether it's true or false, I don't know, but this was there. Ghazali was known for the Ash'ari creed. Obviously, Mahdi ibn Tumurt was never saying I'm pushing the Ash'ari creed, but he was pushing a creed similar to the Ash'aris. But what he was saying in contrast was that everybody else is mujassima, they're anthropomorphists, and they're kuffar, and they're this. So in return, a counter effect was that this was perhaps producing a certain amount of resentment towards Ghazali as well, because his name was constantly being used by people. This is also one of the theories behind what some people say, why people like Ibn Rushd al-Hafid really, why one of the reasons perhaps why he takes so much of a dig at Ghazali and stuff like this is perhaps they say was a side effect to the thing, and it wasn't actually personal against Ghazali, which actually makes sense because he summarizes Ghazali's book, the Mustasfa, and actually taught it as his own book. So I mean, it wasn't. So I mean, that could be, there could be politics involved, but the pretext used at the time was hadith. The tasawwuf thing at that time, the way it's later understood, wasn't common then anyway. It wasn't like a common practice in that sense, the way it's later understood. So that wasn't the pretext at the time. It wasn't that, oh, we're burning his book because he belongs to, let's say, this tariq or something like that. Didn't exist at that time like that. It was because of the fact that they said hadith and so on. But there may have been political strands to it.
Is it only getting big because of just getting big in Spain due to other people like his contemporaries like Abu Bakr ibn Arabi,
You see, could that be? Qadi Bakr ibn Arabi always rates Al-Ghazali.
He's a contemporary.
And he is a contemporary. He's there. But he in fact refers to him as the young genius. Or not young, but the I don't know why he adds smaller to it. Well, he says the smaller genius. It doesn't sound as well in English. But he says the genius, Ad-Danishmand. He refers to him, but he says Ad-Danishmand al-Asghar, and then he's got Danishmand al-Akbar.
He's an idea that he's getting a bit of a rating in Spain anyway.
He is. And Ghazali also has other controversies with him as well. You got to remember, he has the whole, in the beginning, that people said he had gone off into philosophy so much, and people in their times are sometimes not understood.
There was this statement that, one explanation that was given is that he has his own ikhtiyarat in Maz al-Aqaid, which are slightly different to the Ash'aris as well.
Who? Al-Ghazali?
Ghazali.
Okay.
So as a result, some of the Malikis in general disliked him differently back in early Ash'ari.
But at the time, I don't think, like in Al-Andalus at the time, you see, this thing like people were generally upon that type of creed, as we're going to see even Qadi Iyad in his, he is going to speak, which is pretty much in similar really just to the Ash'ari thing, although he's not going to say this is Ash'ari, but it's the same type of thing. Yet they don't use that as the pretext. I mean, they don't say that, you know, the reason we've got an issue with Ghazali is because of the, I think if he was initially defamed, it was probably because of his approach into philosophy, although later on he refuted the philosophers. But they say that, you know, he went into it so much, and then the fact that he was obviously very ascetic as well. He had this thing of like when he went off to the desert and lived there for years and did all of this, and sometimes people don't like that, and this is why obviously you see people like Al-Mazari, when he speaks of Ghazali, he speaks of him just, I mean, at best neutrally. Like he doesn't really, like there ain't many positive, although perhaps there ain't that many negatives either, but he doesn't. But when you see Tartushi, Abu Bakr ibn Arabi teacher speaking of him, he just outright slates him. He just says, I don't know what the hype is about this guy. There's nothing special about him, and the guy's like this. And in fact, he says, I've met him, and he says, and what I saw was that basically he kind of like, he criticizes him like academically as well, like Ilman as well, says that, you know, this, and he says, I don't, and that basically he saw incorrect things, and he kind of like refutes him. So there was this sentiment, but that's going to happen with anybody that rises. When somebody rises and they have like certain oddities about them, which Ghazali definitely had, like going off to a desert, living in a desert for a few years and doing stuff like this. Prior to which, you remember, he was a don in Baghdad, and this is why Abu Bakr ibn Arabi says to him when he randomly comes across him in the desert that, whoa, weren't you the same guy that, you know, he says like 500 mu'ammamin used to, like people with imamas used to sit in front of, and at least, and they would listen to your, you see, when he says mu'ammamin, he means like scholars would sit in your dars and listen to your tafsir and listen to your this, and he says, wasn't that surely better than you sitting here randomly in this desert? And then obviously the whole interesting thing, and he gives him he gives actually a poetic response to him, where he says that, you know, oh, I did this and I did this, and but he begins it, he says, but he has this thing about فَعُدْتُ إِلَى تَصْحِيهِ أَوَّلِ مَنْزِلِي, that I thought it's better that I return to fix my first abode, like meaning myself, but he has this nice line at the end where he says, فَغَزَلْتُ لَهُمْ غَزْلًا دَقِيقًا فَلَمْ أَجِدْ, he says, فَنَسَجْتُ لَهُمْ غَزْلًا دَقِيقًا فَلَمْ أَجِدْ لِغَزْلِ نَسَّاجًا فَكَسَّرْتُ مِغْزَلِي, or something like that, along these lines, where he says, I kind of like I spun for them this type of, you know, like meaning like I spun for them almost this thread, or I spun this type of material for them, but I didn't find anybody that could make anything out of what I'm giving. Like what he's trying to say is that I found people who were just unfortunately like not incapable or maybe ungrateful of what I had to offer. And he says, so I just broke my type of whatever, you know, that whatever you weave that thing with, and he says I just broke that and just left it, meaning, and that's his kind of poem, almost a bit despairing. But then Abu Bakr ibn Arabi lives with him for a good while and studies with him and rates him forever. But so I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I just mean, were the Murabitun Athari in there?
I don't think they were, although they were accused of being Athari, but I mean, I don't know if they themselves were, because in their time there were these people there. Like obviously the Muwahhideen accused them of that, but I've never, I mean, from their time, see, because there's a difference as well between rulership and scholarship. Because the Murabitin were the ruling class, and they weren't scholars. They were obviously like people that, and most of them came from like almost like a Bedouin-like background, and they were, if anything, they were known for they were just fighters. And that's what they were actually known for. The Murabitin were. They were just like people that were just known for, they were just constantly, some have said almost obsessed with war, like to the extent that they were like, this is why the Spaniards really hate when they look back in history, the era of the advent of the Murabitin, the Almoravids, because they say these people came from Africa, they were just barbarians, they just wanted war, just killing, they have this type of reflection, because they were, although I mean that's obviously highly biased, but the point is that they were a people that were definitely into war. The difference is whether that they were barbaric in their thing or not is a different debate, but they were definitely into that. So, now, any other questions?
What books do you recommend just about the history about this era and the people?
Well, you're in luck, right? Because you need to listen to my course on the history of Al-Andalus, which comes in 12 lectures and is known as Al-Andalus from rise to fall. But
It's free, right?
I'll have that bit edited. Right, so, but I mean, on a serious note, once I do get the thing edited, I do recommend that you all kind of get access to it. It's in a great amount of detail. Other than that, if you want to get books on it, there's been quite a few things written. Tariq Swaydan's book is obviously very good on the history of Al-Andalus. There's, you just have to type in really anything on it. There's been so many. I mean, I've got a few different things, like I've got things on which will just say like the Dawla of the Muwahhideen, the Dawla of the Murabitin, the Dawla, like individual books on individual characters, or there's books on, for example, the Dawr of the Maliki Fuqaha, like that. It's called Dawr al-Fuqaha fi ahd al-Khilafa, fi ahd al-Imara wal-Khilafa al-Umayyah fil Andalus. So the point is that the role of the scholars during the era of Bani Umayyah, basically, in Al-Andalus. And that's really interesting. If you just want to read a bit more about the people, some of the ulama have written, like Ibn Hazm's written about them. Obviously, he was in their time, speaking about the times before him. But I mean, it's good to just do loads of different research. In Arabic, there's several lectures available. What's his name? Dr. Raghib Sarjani, I think his name is. He has something very fascinating as well. Several lectures on Al-Andalus, but there is quite a bit available on Al-Andalus. But inshallah, once we get that edited, I'll make that available. I did kind of like pour my heart out into that into that course, so I think it's definitely worth a listen. Right, Naam. Any other? هل من سؤال؟ No? We good? This era as well, by the way, it's almost, that era of up till the Murabitin, and then maybe just the beginning of the Muwahhideen. Is really the era up until then is where the major legends and, the top, or the major dons of the madhab that we hear of, that they existed up until about that type of time. Even though after that it still carries on and there's huge people that emerge after, but I'm just saying that the people that came before that were of an interesting type of caliber, mashallah.
What had been there when the plague came through then?
No.
After?
That's after the collapse of the Muwahhideen. The Muwahhideen probably last just over a century as well, really. They don't last too long, probably about 150 years at most. But they start breaking up and there's remnants. But that's after. Then you get the rise of the Mariniyin, and then they split and you get different little... But it is, anyway, interesting. Coming back to this, guys, let's... Al-I'lam bi-hudud qawaid al-Islam. This can be read in two ways. It can be read as Al-A'lam, right, which is like saying... which could either, meaning the signposts, if you like, or it could mean the flags or the names or the signs of the parameters of the foundations of Islam, or al-i'lam, like the declaration, if you like. This is the more popular al-i'lam bi hudud qawaid al-Islam. Qadi Iyad in this sometimes, not necessarily in the first section, sometimes you will see he does follow a style which is quite unique to him. So he does, he will mention things which are sometimes, like you might think, other mu'allifin, other ulama don't quite follow that style. So we'll see more in maybe Kitab al-Salah, where he's got things like that. But the point is not to kind of, it's not too much of a big deal. The main thing is that the message is still the same. So for example, if somebody puts this as a fadila, or if they put it as a sunnah, or if they put it as it's still all good, and the main thing is they're trying to encourage that you do it. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قال الشيخ الإمام الحافظ القاضي أبو الفضل عياض ابن موسى ابن عياض اليحسبي رضي الله عنه. By the way, when we say al-Qadi, the Qadi said in the madhab, technically, according to the fuqaha, if you just in the Maliki madhab, if they say the Qadi has said, who are they speaking of? No. Abdul Wahhab al-Baghdadi. But generally, somebody else who is actually quite popular, especially universally, as al-Qadi is Qadi Iyad. But within the madhab, within the fiqh texts, if you read somewhere they said Qal al-Qadi, they're either talking about, they say there's two who are known as just the Qadiyan, they're either talking about Abdul Wahhab al-Baghdadi or Ibn al-Qassar. That's within the fiqh texts, the Maliki fiqh texts. Okay. Alhamdulillah alladhi la yanbaghi alhamdu illa lah. That all praise be to Allah, to whom or only to whom praise belongs. وأسأله أن يخص بأزكى صلواته وأنمى بركاته محمدا نبينا وآله. Okay, and I ask Allah that He really sends, or He says He sends a particular, almost, and the most pure of all blessings upon, and the most blessed of all blessings upon our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and his followers. وَأَن يُخْلِصَ لِوَجْهِهِ أَقْوَالَ الْكُلِّ مِنَّا وَأَعْمَالَ. And that Allah makes sincere for Him from us all of our actions and our statements. وَبَعْدْ. So now he's beginning his a brief intro into the book. He says, أَيُّهَا الرَّاغِبُ فِي الْخَيْرِ. He says, oh, you who seeks well or is seeking khair, seeking goodness, الْحَرِيسُ عَلَى تَدْرِيبِ الْمُتَعَلِّمِينَ لِوُجُوهِ الْبِرِّ. Somebody who is keen to educate those who are seeking knowledge so that they may do good. فَإِنَّكَ سَأَلْتَنِي فِي جَمْعِ فُصُولٍ سَهْلَةِ الْمَأْخَذِ قَرِيبَةِ الْمَرَامِ مُفَسَّرَةِ حُدُودِ قَوَاعِدِ الْإِسْلَامِ. Right, see the balagha pours out. Allahu Akbar. Seriously, some of the ulama, you have to read them for their eloquence. And then people say, why are the books of the contemporaries any different? Subhanallah. Seriously, they are too different. He says that you have asked me, and he's obviously addressing somebody, that you have asked me to collect, to really compile a few small sections which are easy to access, easily accessible. They are they are fulfilling, or purposive is the word, fulfilling their objective. And mufassiratin, and that they explain hudud qawaid al-Islam, the parameters of the foundations of Islam. Then he says, فَعْلَمْ وَفَّقَنَا اللَّهُ وَإِيَّاكَ. That know, may Allah grant us success. أَنَّ مَبَانِيَ الْإِسْلَامِ خَمْسَةً. That the foundations of Islam are 5. كَمَا قَالَ نَبِيُّنَا عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. That بُنِيَ الْإِسْلَامُ عَلَى خَمْسٍ. شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة وصيام رمضان وحج البيت. That Islam has been built upon 5, the shahadatain, that establishing the prayer, giving the zakat, fasting of Ramadan, and visiting the house of Allah. Right? Inshallah, this hadith is transmitted in Bukhari, it's in Muslim, it's in most of the ummahat. Na'am, طبعا. If you want my full isnad, I'll get the isnad inshallah from one of those texts and make that available. Right, so this is a very popular hadith. It is very simple and is taught to children. At the same time, it is the foundation upon which the deen is built. And that is what Qadi Iyad has built this book around. So So, na'am. So, I mean, that's the hadith, and na'am, you can say, inshallah, you transmit that from me if you like. So, there is this thing of having this, of seeking sometimes chains and of having that within. That is really part of the legacy and the tradition that we have, and it is a good thing that if people can do that. Na'am. So, he's now going to reach al-qa'idatul ula, which I don't know if I should keep saying. The first foundation, which is ash-shahadatan, that the two shahadas, and na'am.
Is there a difference in language between qaida and asl?
Yeah.
What's the like linguistically?
You mean linguistically or you mean technically? Just linguistically.
Linguistically. Is that different?
I mean the asl, the qa'id. Well,
Like qaida, asas, or qawaid, asas.
you see, because the thing is that the asl is the source, yeah, of something. Qa'ida is like an established, something which is set out, is laid down. Like from the word qa'ada, to kind of lay down, to sit down, to kind of sit something in, to establish it like that. Asl is the origin of something. So linguistically there is a difference, although there's similarities in the usage at times, but there's depends how you're using it as well. So, نعم أستاذ تفضل.
شرح القاعدة الأولى وهي الشهادتان ولا بد فيها من اعتقاد بالقلب ونطق باللسان وتفاصيلها 40 عقيدة 10 يعتقد وجوبها و10 يعتقد استحالتها و10 يتحقق وجودها و10 متيقن ورودها.
Right. He begins by saying that this is the first shahadatan, which is the two shahadas, and he says that a person, it is necessary that he believes them with the heart, but he also expresses it with the tongue. Okay, provided that there is capacity to do so, a person must express his iman or her iman as well. It's not enough to just say, I only believe in my heart, like, and I've never expressed it. So this is why throughout the verses Allah mentions alladhina qalu, throughout the thing, that look, that those who said that Allah is our Lord, and so on and so forth. So this is and then he goes into saying and the detail is that there are 40, and what is interesting is how neatly he sections everything off. And sometimes you can see he might expand something just so it fits a neat type of, which is good because he's teaching young people, he's teaching children, he wants them to learn it well. So he says, and the detail is that there are 40 points of aqidah. That's what he says. He says 10 which you must believe necessarily, 10 which you must believe in their necessity, that they are necessary. Okay. He says, and 10 that you must believe are inconceivable or impossible, and 10 which you must believe have realized, okay, and 10 which you must believe will become a reality, or will maybe that's not the best way to translate will become a reality, because, or rather that they will come upon you, or will whether they'll come upon you or will occur, yes, perhaps, because we will believe that some of them are already a reality, except we haven't are not exposed to them. So, and then he's going to begin with the first 10. So he split them into these 4 categories, 10 each, and he's beginning with those which are necessary, those which are wajib. So na'am.
فالعشر الواجبات أن تعتقد أن الله واحد غير منقسم في ذاته.
And he says, and from these, the ashar wajibat, that you believe Allah is one, غير منقسم في ذاته, that he does not divide within his essence. You don't say like he's composite of, like he can kind of split into, I don't know, different, like he's one, that's it, indivisible. It's not like there is, Allah does not split or divide in his essence. Now,
وأنه ليس معه ثان في إلهيته.
and that there is no second with Allah in his being Allah, okay, or in his divinity.
وأنه حي قيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم.
And this, as you can see, taking from the verse, that Allah is alive and He is the one who maintains everything. He is Hayy, He is Qayyum. لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم. He is not taken by sleep. And that is just a direct, obviously, iqtibas from the verse of the Quran. Sina means it's like a drowsiness. It's like the early stages of sleep, and Naum is actual sleep. So that's in the verse, لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم. Allah is not taken by or seized by or affected by any type of drowsiness or sleep.
وأنه إله كل شيء وخالقه.
And that he is God of everything, and He is the God for everything, really. وخالقه, and the creator of everything.
وأنه على كل شيء قدير.
And that Allah is upon all things powerful.
وأنه عالم بما ظهر وما بطن.
No, لا يعزب عنه. Okay, لا يعزب عنه مثقال ذرة في
لا
السماء.
يعزب عنه مثقال ذرة في السماوات ولا في الأرض.
And that Allah, He is all knowing of everything, that which is whether it is exposed, that which is apparent, or that which is hidden. And then the verse of the Quran, لا يعزب عنه مثقال ذرة, that an atom's weight of something is not hidden from Allah, في السماوات ولا في الأرض, neither in the heavens nor the earth.
وأنه مريد لكل كائن من خير أو شر.
And that Allah has willed, that's how you translate that Allah has willed for everything which is in existence, whether it is good or bad. And there's a difference between that Allah, whether He has asked you to do it, or whether He wants you to do it, or whether, but that Allah has willed for it to occur, the irada. No.
ما شاء كان وما لم يشأ لم يكن.
That which Allah wishes occurs, or wishes occurs, and that which Allah does not wish does not occur.
وأنه سميع بصير متكلم بغير جارحة ولا آلة.
And that Allah is all hearing, all seeing, speaking without a limb or an organ or any type of medium. Like Allah doesn't need a medium to kind of speak, a tool or an apparatus.
بل سمعه وبصره وكلامه صفات له.
Rather, His hearing, His sight, His speech are attributes of His.
لا تشبه صفاته الصفات كما لا تشبه ذاته الذوات.
ليس كمثله.
ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير.
And neither do His attributes resemble the attributes of any, as neither does His essence resemble any essence whatsoever. ليس كمثله شيء. There is nothing like unto Allah. وهو السميع البصير, and He is all hearing, all seeing.
Good question. In terms of the commentaries on this, are they available?
I'm not aware of any commentary in print. I mean, I'm not aware of it. I did try to research into it. I haven't come across anything available. If something is, I'm not sure. But I am aware that, like I said, Al-Qubab and Al-Uqbani, they did write some commentaries on this, but I'm not aware of it being...
The first sentence that talks about belief with the heart and expresses it with the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
How come we didn't go a step further with some people that with the limbs as well?
But that shahada.
Yeah.
The shahada isn't expressed with the limbs.
But that's just, he's just talking about the shahada.
The shahada is expressed by the tongue. The other actions, like salah and stuff, will come later on, which is expressed by the limbs.
Okay. So, but we were saying the shahada is just expressed by the tongue, and that's it then.
that is the limb to express the shahada with. Like the shahada, there's nothing more to do.
As opposed to
As a-
definition of iman, I think that's what-
Yeah, like generally people say iman, faith is what is like is believed in the heart and uttered by the tongue and put into practice with the limbs, or what as Ibn Abdul Bar has said, it is kind of qualified by the actions of the limbs, which is perhaps, he says, وَيَزْكُوا بِالْعَمَلِ, Ibn Abdul Bar's wording. But
What I mean, he's talking about the iman is qualified for the limbs of the
the
shahada.
iman, not shahada. Shahadatan are the declaration of faith is what is important for iman. So that there isn't, there's no acting for the shahadatan.
Can I ask a question about the Arabic in the text? فَمَا لَا تُشْبِهُ ذَاتَهُ
Adhawat. Adhawat.
should be two.
No.
Isn't it?
No. ولا تشبه. It says ولا تشبه ذاته. ذاته. Is that the first that you're talking about?
ذَاتَهُ الذَّوَاتِ. It's got about T. Otherwise,
No, I mean it should be ولا تشبه ذاته الذوات.
it's ذَاتُهُ.
But it
Yeah.
could also be the other one out.
لا تشبه ذواته ذاته. Yeah, but I mean there's
The
no.
essences don't resemble his essence.
No, because the thing is, I mean, but it isn't, but it could be, but because obviously speaking about Allah, it says wala tushbihun, like the first one, sifatuhu sifat, like we're speaking about, like usually the subject matter, the what you're actually speaking about becomes the fa'il usually, but from a linguistic perspective, you could switch them around, but this would be لا تشبه ذاته الذوات, like in that sense. But
Either way, in your book, does it say datuhu?
ذاته, it does say that as
In
well.
yours it says datuhu, and then adawati, so there's a mistake somewhere.
No, it's definitely ذاته. And ذواته, like you said, or الذوات is because it's obviously the مفعول. نعم.
والعشر المستحيلات.
And now he's going to take a look at the 10 things which are, some people translate these as impossibles, or better still, inconceivable. نعم.
أن تعتقد أنه تعالى يستحيل عليه الحدوث والعدم، بل هو تعالى بصفاته وأسمائه قديم باق دائم الوجود قائم على كل نفس بما كسبت.
Shukran. Right, that you must believe this regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it is impossible that Allah comes. Huduth, to translate huduth is a good translation for it. What would be a good translation? Because I mean, generally, for something hadatha is to become created or to occur or to.
An occurrence, basically.
Yeah, but when they say something is hadith, usually they're just saying created, to become subject to, basically to become subject to any type of laws of creation, in a way, that to become constricted, as in, like, because anything that is a creation is subject to certain laws of existence, of, for example, there will be an end, it will be subject to this, time, space, all these things are relevant to huduth, to something which is created. So
Is contingent a good translation?
okay, I mean it could, I'm just not sure what people would understand from that, you see. Like if I said it's impossible for Allah to be contingent, or contingency is impossible upon Allah, I'm just not sure what people would understand, whether that would make I mean if it makes sense, then fine. I mean, I'm just saying I'm just not sure if most people would understand what that exactly meant. That's why I'd rather explain it in a sentence, to say, look, huduth generally in Arabic means when something is created or something occurs, it gives that type of meaning, that something, and then it has these laws with it, the laws of nature, as in it will be trapped within time, within this, within space, within so on. And they're trying to say this huduth is impossible for Allah. And al-adam, and non-existence, is impossible. It says, rather Allah with His attributes and His names is qadimun baqi, that He is pre-eternal. Qadim is pre-eternal, before any time existed, and baqin, eternal. And then he says, Da'imul wujud, that Allah is forever existing. Qa'imun ala kulli nafsin bima kasabat. That Allah is, in this case, like overseeing, really, upon all or every soul for that which the soul has earned. Okay? Now,
ليس له أول ولا آخر بل هو الأول والآخر.
That Allah has no beginning and end, in the sense He doesn't have a, right, at this point is the first of Allah and at this is the end of it. It doesn't work like that. And then there's the verse of the Quran, هو الأول والآخر, that He is the first, He is the last, like in the sense, like not meaning first as in something, but this is to show that there was nothing before. Now,
وأنه لا إله سواه لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا.
That there is no God except Allah. And then the verse of the Quran, لو كان فيهما, that if in the heavens and the earth there were gods, as in the plural, إلا Allah, like meaning other than Allah, لفسدتا, that they would have been destroyed or corrupted, meaning it shows that obviously if there was a conflict, if there were gods, there would naturally have been a conflict. Because the whole concept would be that if they were all God, right, then God by the very definition is a being that is all powerful and all willing, like has complete will, has complete control. So having complete will means that you can will for whatever you want at that particular time. Now if there's two absolute willing bodies, that must mean that if they're totally independent, that they must be able to do their will, their own will. And if there was more than one, they would have to, obviously, they would have to battle it out. It would be a battle of the wills. So the one that loses would definitely not be God.
That's what happened to Titan.
And the one that won wouldn't be God either, because if he had to fight for it, then he didn't have absolute control. That wasn't a God. So God is that which, or the being that has absolute control, absolute will. So نعم.
وأنه مستغن عن جميع خلقه غير محتاج إلى ظهير في ملكه. وأنه لا يشغله شأن عن شأن في قضائه وأمره.
Right, okay, and that Allah is independent from all of His creation, not in any need of any support or help in His dominion. وَأَنَّهُ لَا يَشْغَلُهُ شَأْنٌ عَنْ شَأْنٍ فِي قَضَائِهِ وَأَمْرِهِ. That no matter or affair can distract Allah from His judgment and from His rule. Okay, so the fact that there's so many things going on, this or that, this is not distracting for Allah. نعم.
وأنه لا يحويه مكان في سماواته ولا أرضه بل هو كما كان قبل خلق المكان.
And that Allah is not contained by any place in the heavens nor the earth. بل هو كما كان قبل خلق المكان. Rather, He is as He was before space was created. So that is the transmission as well. When people have asked sometimes, where is Allah? And there has been a response that has been transmitted, I believe even from Ibn Abbas radiallahu an. I mean, that's what is generally transmitted, that he said, Huwal an kama kan, that he is now as He forever was, meaning before creation, before there was, even if you say the arsh, before the creation of the arsh, as Allah was then, He is now. That Huwal an kama kan, that He is today as He was. So he says here as well, Bal huwa kama kan qabla khalqil makan. Right, so نعم.
وأنه ليس بجوهر ولا جسم ولا على صورة ولا شكل ولا له شبيه ولا مثل بل هو الأحد الصمد الذي لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد.
Right, and he says that وأنه ليس بجوهر ولا جسم, that Allah is not a body nor is He a substance. Okay, He isn't, like, we don't believe that, we cannot fathom. You see, things in creation, everything usually will be a jawhar, or it will be an ard. Okay, things will be like, they will either be a substance, or they will be what in philosophy they say an accident, like meaning a quality that is carried by a substance or by a body, meaning that things would have to be one of these three. They would have to be either a jawhar, a jism, or an ard. So whether it will be, for example, whether you say like light, it won't necessarily be a body or maybe but it will be a quality that is kind of reflected, or whether it does have some type of whatever nowadays, however they want to describe it in physics. But the point is, this is how you look at things. So when you say color, it will be a quality that is carried by substance and carried by a body, so on. So, but when we speak of Allah, He is none of these things. Okay, and He is not upon a form nor a shape. He has no similarity or example in things. Bal huwa al-ahad as-samad. And this once again, iqtibas, where you take from something here clearly from the Quran, that Allah, that He is the one, that He is Allah Samad. Samad is, like they say, who gets kind of like what, like who does, like forceful in delivering what He wants, in the sense that the one that is completely independent of anybody else. Like He is Samad in that sense. Allahu Samad. Lam yalid, Allah is not born. Walam yulad, and Allah lam yalid, that He did not give birth. Walam yulad, and neither was He born. And then He finishes it off. Walam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad, or kufuan ahad. But that, and there is no similarity, or there is nothing which is similar or like unto Allah.
Mufti.
No.
You know the hadith of the Mala al-A'la?
No.
The wording in that hadith is, the Lord came to me fi ahsani suratin. Is that right?
I think that's but that's been questioned, hasn't it? No. But okay. Now okay. But I mean, are you speaking about the same? Is that the question, or is there more to it?
So the question is, because the word is used in the narration.
Yeah.
What do we say about, the fact that it's used in the hadith of the Prophet in his own words, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then Qadi Iyad is saying?
First of all, Aqidah is not built upon like just isolated narrations and stuff like this. It is built upon conclusive facts and conclusive qat'i transmissions. So, as Ibn al-Arabi as well, in reference to this, does say that, and quoting the verse, إِنَّ الظَّنَّ لَا يُغْنِي مِنَ الْحَقِّ شَيْئًا, that you can't use, like dhann, anything which is dhanni cannot be used to establish fact regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other thing is that hadith has been questioned anyway, and that element of it has been problematized by the ulama, and I believe that is also from the Mushkilul Hadith, which I believe Ibn Furuq has spoken on as well. But not just him, other ulama have spoken on that. So this fi ahsani surah is mutakallam fi. It's not like a clear like narration from my understanding. But I'll inshallah look into what they've said. But the hadith of the Mala isn't like, there's more of a purpose to it than just that type of there's the whole incident, isn't it? That isn't the purpose of the hadith, So I mean, so to be fair, and so where you see these type of things, where there's these sentences, you can take them with a pinch of salt, if you like, in the sense that you can be sure that there would be some element of, there would be a problem with that anyway. So
if you want to things will open up in the discussion, because you find verses in Quran as well that then have apparent tashbih.
yeah,
Apparent.
like which ones?
وَمَثَلُ اللَّهِ
كمثل النور and so on. نور السماوات والأرض.
Or,
Yeah, but
this is God, man.
okay, that's a good point actually. You see, the difference is وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. We didn't say here that there is no mathal. We said there is no mithal. There is a difference. Like, if we said that Allah, is there a, like you see, in English, I suppose you're going to say like an example, but we don't mean like a mathal doesn't mean an example in that sense. Like, it means like you're trying to state some similarity in the sense of not in being. Like mithal means like, oh, like this. A mathal is almost like proverbial in a way, like I'm trying to say something. So where Allah says, and to Allah belongs really the most elevated, al-mathalul a'la, the most elevated type of example. If you are going to give an example of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you give the most elevated. And so in that sense, and where Allah says, وَمَثَلُ نُورِ, the exact verse is وَمَثَلُ نُورِهِ, isn't it? And that Allah, but He gives the example saying that وَمَثَلُ نُورِهِ, and the type of, of His nur is like this, and this whole, the glass and the misbah and the zujaj and the whole thing. But that's not saying the same as that is the mathal of Allah. But it is speaking of His light, in the way that His light, the way it permeates and the way it kind of like reaches all. It's more about the reach, which is understood as well by the context. It's not, so I suppose in that case, but generally you won't find, so I mean, unless you can think of other examples which are,
examples of tashbih and
no, okay, that's a different topic. Okay, yeah, so I mean, like where you say, well, we've said here Allah isn't a jism, and He isn't a shakal, He isn't this, and He isn't that, and then where you say in the Quran it does mention things like limbs, I suppose you're saying like body parts, or mentions hands, face, stuff like this. Is that, say that again, sorry. Okay, istiwa. Okay, that has been this is going to turn into a proper the thing is, generally, as you can see here, we don't generally believe that it is, you see, to take it literal, because first of all, these things do come in the Quran, as do other verses as well. So the point would be, where Allah does mention in the Quran things like whether it's going to be the hand of Allah, or whether that Allah has created Adam with His hands and so on, or whether He's going to say the face, they use the word face or stuff like this, or in the ahadith whether the word foot will appear and stuff like this. Now the ulama have obviously understood that, well, wait a minute, what have these verses actually come for? And these verses hadn't come, like where that has been mentioned, they weren't there as in to teach aqeedah, as in like when Allah says fa'alamu anna Allah, like Allah is saying, know this is a matter of aqeedah. He's not saying it like that, they all know this, that I've got a face and I've got hands and I've got this, al-iyad billah. It's not like that. So it comes in a context. So Allah will say like yadullahi fawqa aydi, and the hand of Allah was above their hands, or was over their hands. Now this was to do with the bay'ah that they took, and Allah is mentioning, and even people that would take things literally would accept that, look, this doesn't really mean that. Like, we understand this. So here, traditionally, the ulama have kind of split. Do we always interpret the word hand to mean something else, or do we always interpret this? In my understanding, I would just say, look, it's quite reasonable to understand the context. And you'd understand it there. I'm not saying you have to always carry this word to mean this meaning, but in the context you'll understand. So where Allah is praising the Sahaba and praising the bay'ah, and then says, those who give you bay'ah and so on, وَيَدُ اللَّهِ فَوْقَ أَيْدِيهِمْ, and Allah's hand is over their hands. Most people would understand that generally to mean that Allah is telling them that Allah's support is with them, to go do what they're doing, that remain steadfast. Most people wouldn't really think, oh right, Allah here stopped to teach us an aqeedah, point of aqeedah, that by the way, Allah has a hand, even though we're not going to question how it is or so on. But that's what I would say. I mean, I do accept that, look, there is the school of aqeedah, which traditionally would probably be known as the Hanbali school of Aqidah, which do take these things literally. And there is obviously the school within Aqidah, whether it will be the Asha'ira or other people that don't take these things literally. That's my understanding. I do personally believe, and as weird as this may sound, that all of these people do fall still within the realm of Ahl Sunnah, whatever that means in a broad, weird sense, whatever Ahl Sunnah actually means. I've never exactly managed to figure it out, but I mean, damn. Right, that's a good point, because I don't think I did I? But I mean, so whatever the term Ahl Sunnah means, because what we've done generally, see, as Muslims, we've kind of, in hindsight, we've fitted all the labeling. So we've done all this in hindsight, but it hasn't happened as it's been coming. I mean, other things have. So for example, the school of Aqidah did emerge, like the Ash'aris did emerge, and they were one of the first people to call themselves, we are Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And there was this, for example, the Hanbali school did emerge, the Maturidis and all these things did emerge, and they did say we are these people and so on. But when we go back in hindsight, because we're trying to say, oh look, the Salaf were upon so and so and so on. But when, like, let's say Imam Malik's time. Now in Imam Malik's time, or Abu Hanifa's time, or even before them,
You two would be kicking out,
yeah. I mean, besides that,
and beaten. Let's
What?
that.
just throw that in there.
To be fair, you said me. You said me.
Right, so, but the thing is that they totally did not ever say that part of, we are this thing called Ahl Sunnah, or part of this thing called Ahl Sunnah is you believe in this. These things did not exist according to them. So it becomes quite strange. We obviously pigeonhole everything in hindsight. Like, we look back and say, oh yeah, but they were part of this, and those people say, no, they were part of this. And I've always said it's very interesting that, I mean, we're going through all of this, and obviously ala ra's wal ayn, and we're teaching it and everything, but it's always very interesting with question marks, that how yet these terms like sifat and so on have never appeared in the Quran nor Sunnah or on the tongue of any of the actual Salaf that had actually called people towards it. And so that's interesting. So I'm just saying thought I'll get that in there, but anyway,
One word that we talk about.
say that again.
You only talk about the one word that one can say, that's sifat.
Sifat, yeah, that's, and just the word, but I'm just saying it's such a core thing. But yet in hindsight, when we look back, it's interesting that nobody ever even uttered that word. And what's interesting is a lot of things become in hindsight engineered. So you see, like the Mu'tazila later on for many centuries, which were also a sect known for their deviant beliefs, especially in things like free will. What is interesting is when they are spoken of, they are said to, one of the first descriptive factors that is spoken about them is that, oh, they denounce the sifat of Allah. But what is interesting is that the Mu'tazila actually emerged in the time of the Tabi'een, apparently. And at that time, this word hadn't even really been used. And even what is even more interesting is, you see, for example, people like Ibn Taymiyyah will do a rad on people like Ibn Hazm or many people and say that these people are Jahmi. Now, Jahmiyyah were also a sect which apparently go back to Jahm ibn Safwan, who was around in the time of the Tabi'een. So, and the interesting thing is, they say Jahm, one of the things known about this sect is that they deny the sifat of Allah. But what was curious is, it got me intrigued, because I thought, well, okay, if no discussion was going on in that time, how was he discussing this? And when you look up, you realize actually, okay, they did express many deviant things, but that wasn't actually one of those things. It wasn't sifat, because the whole discussion of sifat hadn't emerged. But what you see is, within a century, other followers that follow on after the Salaf, when this discussion does emerge of sifat, those people take that side. So this is then retrospectively put onto the whole group, that this whole group from its very onset was known for this. But that's also some type of like almost theological engineering taking place in hindsight. But it is, I mean, I don't want to go off on one totally, but it is interesting. The thing is that Islam is simple, and we believe in the things like in the hadith of Jibreel. Okay, that this, when he asked what is Iman, and the Prophet said, believe in these things, and we believe in those things. How we understand them may sometimes vary, you know, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing from people to people. And some people say, okay, this chucks somebody out of Islam, this chucks them out of this chucks out of that. But then my question has been to many people that if that is the case, then you have a hadith, very popular hadith, in which the Prophet ﷺ spoke of this man who had committed so many sins, and before at the time of death, he advised that when I die, he advised his children that I want you to kind of like cremate me, and I want you to scatter my ashes here and do this and do that, because I've been such a bad person, I can't face the akhirah. So they did, and the hadith mentions that this person was then asked. He was actually brought together, not in this world, but in the akhirah. He was brought together, and he was asked that, look, why did you do this? And that he says, out of fear. And that Allah says, you are forgiven. Now the interesting thing here is that, what was his aqidah? His aqidah was that, by becoming cremated, like A, Allah doesn't know what I'm doing right now, my plan. B, Allah is not all powerful of fixing me, because he's thinking he's going to get away with it. 3, he's almost thought he's got a plot of evading the akhirah. 4, he thinks Allah is not watching him right now. 5, he thinks Allah isn't seeing him right now. 6, he's got questions on destiny already, being like, I mean, the aqidah is in big trouble. Okay, it's in major trouble.
Just scrap all this.
No, that's not the ideal aqidah to have. Let me just repeat that. That's not the ideal aqidah to have. He was in trouble. Let me highlight that word, trouble. But my point was, despite his aqidah being totally messed up, which it was, when he's asked by Allah that, why did you do this? And he says, out of fear from Allah. And then Allah says to him that he will be placed in Jannah. This goes to show that, you see, where we start saying such and such person is doomed to Jahannam, and such person is like this, and such person like this, because he had this one little ikhtilaf on this issue. So it just shows that, wait a minute, when you read these ahadith, how stupid this whole stance seems all of a sudden. So that's all what I meant to say. Right now.
وأنه لا تحله الحوادث والتغيرات ولا تلحقه النقائص والآفات.
Naam, that Allah is not affected by any type of occurrences or any type of change. Okay? وَلَا تَلْحَقُهُ النَّقَائِص وَالْآفَاتِ. And Allah is not afflicted by any type of shortcomings or any calamities or any type of deficiency. Now.
وأنه لا يليق به الظلم بل قضاؤه كله حكمة وعدل وأنه ليس شيء من أفعال خليقته بغير قضائه وخلقه وإرادته بل وتمت كلمة ربك صدقا وعدلا لا مبدل لكلماته.
Right, and that Allah is لا تلحقنا لا يليق به الظلم, and that Allah, it is not befitting that oppression be associated with Allah. بل قضاؤه, but rather his judgment, all of it is wisdom and justice. وأنه ليس شيء من أفعال خليقته بغير قضائه وخلقه وإرادته, and that none of his creation do any actions without the will of Allah and without his creation, and that the word of your Lord is complete in truthfulness and justice, and there is nothing that can change the words of your Lord.
So everything Allah's qada.
Everything. Right, okay. I mean, that's it. Let's finish this verse and I'll quickly answer that now.
يضل من يشاء ويهدي من يشاء لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون.
That Allah misguides whom He wills and He guides whom He wants, and that He will not be asked about what He has done, rather they will be asked. on the Day of Judgment. Now this question about al-qada wal-qadar is obviously a very difficult and complex one, but quite simply, just before we quickly just move on to the next thing, is that the way I've kind of usually tried to explain this is that, you see, free will, I like to give an analogy of what is a computer game or a video game. Okay, so in the fact that the game has been already designed, and every possible move or layer of success or points or every possible outcome has already been designed by the designer. Where the person gets to in that game will be up to the player. Except the difference is Allah, obviously in His infinite wisdom, already knows where you will get to. So, as a weak analogy, I mean that's a weak analogy, but it's an analogy that makes some sense. So you can't change the game. You can't all of a sudden say I want it to be a different game. You can't totally change, you can't change the character. You can't change you are already there. However, where you get to, how many points, how successful you are, will be you playing the game.
But is the game fixed?
The game is designed.
If it's fixed, so God already knows what you're going to do anyway.
No, He does know, obviously, and otherwise His knowledge would be deficient.
That's the point.
From Islam to kufr.
This is the aqaid of Islam. We'll do that one another day. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah.
So just to go back to Aqidah of Islam, we believe that Allah has already decreed it.
Yeah.
So it's fixed.
No.
That's why it's called
You see,
qada.
look, it is complex. It is complicated. But I'm just giving an analogy just for people to make sense of it. From a very remote perspective, Allah is absolutely in charge of everything. Full stop.
From a very remote perspective.
Yeah, meaning like from a remote, meaning not like from our way of looking. So it's like saying, look, when we walk about, the ground is flat. From a remote perspective, the clothes an oval shape, or it's however you want to put it, but it's not flat. So from a remote perspective, it looks different. From our everyday world, it looks very different. To us, the sun rises. From a remote perspective, it doesn't. Now, from a remote perspective, Allah is absolutely in control. From our perspective and take on things, we have free will, we have this freedom to move about, we have certain things. This is why I'm giving that type of analogy. Obviously, it's not an absolute analogy, it just makes some sense. I do believe in al-qadr al-mu'allaq. I believe that that certain pathways have been written out for us. If we did this, we would have got there. Had we done that, we may have got there. But these had all been designed by Allah, except He would have known which one we would have taken. Now, we do have that choice. So if you take a certain pathway, it may get you to a better place. Had you taken another one, this is why the Prophet said in a hadith that silatul arham, that keeping good relations with your family, tazidu fil umr, it increases your lifespan. And this is why the hadith says that dua yarudul qadr, that the dua can return. And then when the person said about taking medication, or another hadith about ruqya as well, the Prophet said, huwa min al qadr, it is from, meaning you took that path, that's why it got you there. Had you not taken it, you wouldn't have got there. So it's not, and this is why Umar radiallahu anhu, when he was, somebody tried to criticize him for running away, they said, you fled from that city, and from Damascus, was it at the time? But it was a city that they said was, it was afflicted with a ta'un, and they said, afiraran min qadarillah, you're trying to run from the qadr of Allah, you should have just faced it out. So stood there and faced the plague. And he said, bal nafirru min qadarillah ila qadarillah. He said, rather we run from the qadr of Allah to the qadr of Allah. And so this is a complicated topic, but I think that's okay to just understand it as that, and inshallah move on. What shall we kind of stop it here? I think we should kind of call it to an end here. We've got 20 more points. We've done 20. We've got 20 more, which shouldn't take long actually to cover, and then we can move into And then we can move into Salah next week, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.